The morning of September 14, 2003, broke over Bardstown, Kentucky in a wash of golden light, the kind that makes everything look like a painting. Blake Hamilton was up by 5. He always was. For 10 straight years, his body clock had followed the rhythm of the land. Horses, hay bales, and the quiet labor that begins before sunrise. He rolled out of bed in the small farmhouse he shared with his mother, Dorothy. Jeans, a faded blue shirt, bare feet padding across the cool kitchen floor. The smell of coffee greeted him. His mother was already awake, hands dusted with flour, shaping biscuit dough as she had every morning since he was a boy. Her eyes were still red from tears, not of sorrow, but of pride. The night before, Blake had done something remarkable. In a single rodeo season, he'd swept every major regional title across 3 states. Bull riding in Louisville, bronc riding in Lexington, roping in Nashville. The prize money alone was enough to finally pay off the farm's second mortgage. The one his father had taken out before cancer claimed him in '98. The trophies covered the kitchen table. Belt buckles gleamed under the soft light, ribbons draped across chairs. Dorothy kept touching them, almost afraid they might vanish, that it might all have been a dream. Blake kissed her cheek, poured coffee into a thermos, and stepped out into the crisp September air. The Hamilton farm stretched over 80 acres of rolling Kentucky bluegrass, bordered by tobacco fields on one side and thick woods on the other. In the barn, 6 quarter horses waited. The animals Blake had trained and competed with, their soft whinnies echoing through the morning stillness. There was feed to scatter, troughs to fill, hooves to check. Simple work. Honest work. The kind that clears the mind. From the kitchen window, Dorothy watched him make his way down the dirt path, his silhouette outlined by the rising sun. His boots crunched on gravel. Then he disappeared into the barn point 30 minutes later. She called out for breakfast. No answer. She figured he was checking the fence line in the far pasture, something he often did before eating. She set his plate in the oven to keep warm. By 8 a.m. His coffee thermos still sat untouched on the porch railing. By 9 o'clock, worry began to creep in. Dorothy finally made her way down to the barn herself. The horses were still in their stalls, restless, stamping the floor for food. Blake's gloves sat neatly on the railing where he always left them. His white Ford F-250, the one he'd bought used back in 2001, was parked by the shed, keys still hanging on the hook inside the mudroom. Nothing was missing. Nothing disturbed. Except Blake. Dorothy stood in the center of the empty barn, sunlight streaming through the slats, dust floating in slow motion around her. Her son was 29, strong, careful, responsible. He didn't wander off. He didn't forget to feed his horses. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. She walked back to the house and called the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. Her voice steady though her hands shook so badly she could barely dial. Within 2 hours, the Hamilton farm was alive with searchers. In small towns like Bardstown, news spreads faster than wildfire. And Blake Hamilton wasn't just any missing person. He was the hometown hero. The young man who'd stayed when others left for the city. The one who'd kept his family's farm alive through grit, talent, and sheer will. By noon, more than 60 people had gathered. Some on horseback, others on foot, moving across the property in tight search grids. Sheriff Carl Thompson, a seasoned local who'd known Blake since boyhood, coordinated the effort from the front yard, radio crackling with updates that all said the same thing. Nothing. The barn was searched first. Every stall, every loft, every corner. No sign of a struggle. No damage. No trace of violence. The horses stood calm and unbothered, and those who knew animals knew what that meant. If something terrible had happened there, the horses would have sensed it. The search widened. Volunteers swept through the tobacco fields to the east, their boots sinking into rain-softened soil. Others combed the tree line to the west, calling Blake's name until their voices went hoarse. By 2 o'clock, a helicopter from the Kentucky State Police circled low over the property, the rhythmic thump of its blades echoing through the valley. From above, the pilot saw nothing unusual, no disturbed ground, no discarded clothing, no movement. By late afternoon, search teams reached the banks of the Salt River, about 1.5 miles south of the farm. The water was high and fast from recent storms. Divers entered the murky current, surfacing again and again, each time empty-handed. They warned it could take weeks to search the river fully. Dorothy stood on the riverbank, arms wrapped around herself, watching in silence. Her face was blank, caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. In that space before grief takes shape, Sheriff Thompson began interviewing everyone who'd been at the rodeo finals the night before, looking for anything that might hint at what had happened. A falling out, a threat, a strange encounter. People said Blake had been celebrating, laughing, drinking just enough to enjoy himself but not enough to lose control. By all accounts, he'd been happy. And then, by sunrise, he was gone. He wasn't drunk that night, just relaxed, talkative, lighter than he'd been in months. Friends said Blake seemed happy, almost relieved. He talked about finally being able to breathe again, about taking his mother on a much-needed vacation, maybe even buying a new breeding stallion. No one remembered any arguments. No tensión. He left the bar alone around 11, waved goodbye in the parking lot, and that was the last time anyone saw him outside his mother's kitchen the next morning. For 6 long days, the search consumed Bardstown. Volunteers brought food, lanterns, and blankets. Dorothy Hamilton's kitchen overflowed with casseroles and pies she couldn't bring herself to eat. Flyers bearing Blake's smiling face appeared on every telephone pole in town. His cowboy hat tilted, his grin wide and genuine. Candlelight vigils filled the steps of the First Baptist Church. Local news crews parked their vans on the Hamilton lawn. Cameras pointed at a home full of questions and no answers on the 7th day. Sheriff Tom Thompson sat across from Dorothy at her kitchen table and said the words no mother ever wants to hear. They were scaling back the active search. Not giving up, he promised, but the reality was harsh. Every accessible field had been combed, the river dragged, dozens interviewed, and not a trace had been found. No signs of foul play. No sign of an accident. Nothing at all. Blake Hamilton had vanished into the Kentucky morning like smoke, leaving behind only uncertainty and a mother who refused to stop searching. The investigation shifted quietly from rescue to something darker, something no one in Bardstown dared to name. Sheriff Thompson knew the statistics. When someone disappears without a trace, especially someone with money and recent success, the answers often lie closer to home than anyone wants to believe. So he started unraveling Blake's life, thread by thread, looking for enemies, debts, secrets. What emerged wasn't what he expected. A web of jealousy and resentment that had been simmering beneath the rodeo circuit for years. 3 names kept coming up. Danny Moore, a bull rider from Bowling Green, had finished second to Blake 4 times in a row. Built like a linebacker with a temper to match, he'd once been overheard at a bar grumbling that Blake's wins came from luck or biased judges. When questioned, Danny crossed his arms and insisted he'd been home asleep. His wife backed him up, but her eyes told a different story. Then there was Kyle Weber, a bronc rider from Tennessee. He'd lost the Nashville championship to Blake by less than 2 points, a narrow miss that cost him everything. His training business folded, his property gone, and by the time deputies found him, he was working nights at a lumber yard. Kyle swore he bore no grudge, that rodeo's just business. But Sheriff Thompson noticed the way his voice cracked, and the nervous rhythm of his fingers drumming the table. The 3rd name hit closer to home, Travis Keller. He'd grown up 2 farms over, gone to school with Blake, and years earlier they'd gone into business together, breeding quarter horses. The venture collapsed under debt and rumor. People whispered that Travis had misused Blake's money, that the books didn't add up. When it all fell apart, Blake never demanded repayment, never accused him publicly, but the friendship died there. Travis stopped visiting the Hamilton farm. Blake stopped saying his name. At rodeo events, the 2 men moved through the same crowds like strangers. Thompson interviewed Travis 3 separate times. Each time, Travis told the same story. He'd been home that morning, fixing a fence, with his wife Angela as his alibi. She confirmed it, softly, eyes down. Travis said he was heartbroken, that whatever bad blood existed was long buried. But the sheriff saw the tells. The twitch in Travis's hand, the restless glances toward the door, the sleepless look in Angela's eyes. Still, suspicion wasn't evidence. Thompson had no body, no witnesses, no proof that a crime had even been committed. Without physical evidence, the investigation stalled, caught between what the sheriff believed and what he could prove. Bardstown began to split in quiet debate. Some thought Blake had run off. Others,